you, Richard. Yeah, really good to be here today. I am going to share some slides because we're just going to share some top level results. I promise I will not bore anybody with PowerPoint. I'll make it as succinct as I can. But I hope you will find it quite interesting. So let's see, am I all there sharing everything good? So where we start really is, and I think the connection to today's theme around growth is quite relevant because we really do feel as a consultancy and advisory firm, we work with firms to help them really communicate their value, specifically around the narrative that they use to go to market with. So I think in today's world, I think, we'd all agree that it's important to connect, with meaning to the people that matter to you. So what we did earlier this year is when the sort of top 50 law, the results came out of the top 50 top accountancy and law firms, we decided to take a look at them. And we asked one simple question, which is really how well are these firms communicating their value? And is that actually impacting on their growth? So when, just to go back to when we do look at a narrative, we do always start with looking at purpose and vision, because clearly for us, a vision is about communicating your company's strategy. It should be probably more internally focused, so you'll see the results probably reflect that. But specifically starting out with purpose for us has always been a really strong foundation for your narrative. So by looking across the available information that we could access, obviously externally through your comms, we looked across websites, annual reviews, and increasingly now I'm quite happy to see more and more transparency reports as well that are available on firms' websites. And we really did look at how well these companies communicate across 5 distinct value areas. So you'll see in there, naturally going to be just, it's around your products and services. It's around, for some companies, particularly if they're listed, financials. So a lot of your corporate clients will be reporting on financials, obviously. And then you can see you've got ESG as well. So it's just how well you're generating value across those 3 as well. And then, literally just examining and looking at the value you're creating, and actually, more importantly, really asking the question of why does it actually matter to the stakeholders that you need to influence. So what we discovered was on a positive note. Even though I've titled this slide like a lack of purpose, the last time we did this study in 21, these figures were like 19 and 21%. So there's been a real effort for firms to articulate or go through the exercise of having a purpose. So that's positive to see. However, when we went and really interrogated and looked at these purpose statements, it was only half of those that really genuinely are doing it well, where it felt very authentic and real. So these are examples of ones that I feel are quite grandiose. They're very lofty statements for, I feel, a law firm or an accounting firm to claim. I mean, I think even just the one, helping your future take off, for me could be a recruitment consultancy. And I just really do wonder sometimes how can a firm genuinely, achieve some of these purposes? If that is their leading principle as a business, it is quite lofty, and does it actually sound authentic and achievable? So the other thing then to notice, vision doesn't come up so high, but that, as I mentioned earlier, is not so much of an issue, because I think it should be an internally focused communication that should be aligned to values. Quite often the 2 aren't aligned. And the other thing that I've seen is sometimes vision and purpose there was confusion between what they actually are. So what was really positive to see is clearly ESG is being well communicated, and we're seeing a really good evidence of clearly outlined agendas with clear, KPIs set out. And so it just feels less like the old day CSR. It's less about just what you do for the community. There are clear strategies in place. I suspect also because there is pressure now, because being in the value chain of your corporate clients, you also need to have this in place. And then I think when we looked at the overarching kind of ability to really have a joined up, cohesive narrative that really talks about value and integrates it through the whole of your comms, there really wasn't that very many firms that actually did it well. I mean, I think this sort of equates to something like, I've written down like 3 in 6 firms. It's not really great. So what does that actually tell us? Think there is generally some confusion around purpose and what it really means, and I just wonder whether in trying, we're still failing. So what can we really do, and what can how can purpose work for professional services firms? And I guess what we would like to do is to kind of like really look at the stakeholders you need to speak to first, look at how they are now all converging, and how what we then do is map across those value pillars that we talked about and map it across to the value. So when we work with clients, we'll say, okay, really drill down across these value areas what you do deliver to each of those stakeholder groups that you serve, and then really question why and evidence it. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be evidenced. It can't be just grandiose statements. And I think where you will see in the public listed companies that we often work with as well, they have to be very transparent now about all of this, and they do a better job because they have to report in that way. They need to be able to report strategic visions and show 3 to 5 year plans of what they're doing. So I think we can learn a lot from our own clients, and I think because we work with those clients as well, I think for us it's easy for us to translate this to professional services firms that we work with. So the question as well is, when we go through this exercise, it's really clear when we map the value that you believe that you deliver. And what drops out from this is we get a really clear business value proposition for all of what you do. And for some companies that might actually be purpose. The next slide will show you that. But the other thing it does is it brings out a really clear customer value proposition. It brings out an employee value proposition, which is key. And then for anyone who has shareholders or investors, you will get your investor value proposition, because it will drop out of the financials and the governance that in those 5 pillars. So, really, I guess our question is, are you also genuinely purpose-led or a value-driven organization? And when you look at this slide, when we map, for example, what the index is or the value that you have across those 5, if you're very high in societal giving in what you do as a business, you are more likely to be more purpose driven. I mean, for example, I'm working with a firm at the moment, and they are legal aid, so they are very, very purpose driven, and the people that work for them are choosing to work for that firm. They're probably choosing to work on lower pay because that's they want to be in mission led companies. So that really, is kind of like a very sort of a top level summary of the findings that we've got. We've got a much bigger report, obviously, that we can share. But I just feel like it's, our main takeaways, I guess, are just really think about how purpose-led you really are. And if you're not, and you're not clear, maybe don't go out with a grandiose purpose statement. Think more about your value proposition and that business value proposition, and just keep it really simple, be authentic, and more importantly, be relevant. So I think in a nutshell, and I'm hoping, Richard, that I've been very good in keeping to my time, that is a summary, I guess, of what we wanted to communicate today.